Hey everyone, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com, and I am being joined by good old JM Jeff Meacham. How you doing today, Jeff?
Doing good. Another warm, sunny day here in Santa Clarita, California, but we're staying cool. We got the fan on and got the boy watching WWE Network. It's all he watches now, is WWE Network. So Vince is getting his investment back tenfold by having my son be brainwashed.
So my question is, has he been watching SummerSlam since we have SummerSlam coming up?
You know, he's been watching whatever pay-per-view tickles his fancy at the moment. Right now, he's watching the 2002 Survivor Series. He wanted to watch the first Elimination Chamber match. So I said, well, there's one at SummerSlam 2003 after that, so you can watch that one next.
Yeah, you got to get him watching a SummerSlam marathon. You got SummerSlam coming up next week. Have him binge watch.
Well, we got, 2 weeks to go to SummerSlam as of right now?
Yeah, less than 2 weeks until SummerSlam. So on NoDQ.com, there was a ranking list where people could rank the SummerSlam pay-per-views from best to worst. And what we're going to do today is go over that list and talk about what we agree with and what we disagree with. For the most part, I agree with the list, but there are some choices that I'm a little confused by. But this is the fans voting. They made the decision here. They ranked the pay-per-views from best to worst. So we're just going to go ahead and give our thoughts on the list results that stand currently. Ranking at number one.
Yes.
This one is a little bit of a surprise for me. Even though I was at that show and it was an awesome show, I would not say it was the number one SummerSlam of all time. Number one right now is 2013, which of course was headlined by John Cena versus Daniel Bryan, and the best match on the show, in my opinion, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar. Do you think this is the all-time greatest SummerSlam in history, 2013?
Well, when you first presented the list to me and on NoDQ.com, we were prepping for this, that list was changed in that 2002 was number one. And that I kind of agree with, because 2002 had a great main event, a solid undercard, while 2013, which you were at, and I was down the street at Hooters waiting for you guys to return for the big NoDQ after party, solid main event, a decent match on the undercard with Punk and Lesnar. Like you said, probably the match of the night. But I don't really remember anything else from that show. And that's very telling. It was only 3 years ago.
Yeah, in my
opinion, I don't really remember a whole lot of what happened.
Yeah, in my opinion, it was a two-match show. I mean, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar was awesome. One of the best SummerSlam matches in history, in my opinion. Cena versus Daniel Bryan was a great match as well, and that was Daniel Bryan's first time winning the WWE title. And, of course, the big angle afterwards with Randy Orton coming out, cashing in Money in the Bank, and turning heel. Triple H turning heel as well, and that led to the beginning of the Authority. So that was a very eventful end to the pay-per-view. But beyond those two matches, I mean, we had the Ring of Fire match, which I thought was a complete dud. That was Bray Wyatt's, I believe, his first pay-per-view match, either his first or his second pay-per-view match. I thought that was disappointing. Yeah. And you had a decent card overall, but it was really those two main event matches that carried the show. Coming in at number two, which I feel should be number one, and like you said, I think at some point it was number one, and recently 2013 got ahead in the ranking. 2002, in my opinion, from start to finish, was the most solid SummerSlam card in history. It kicked off huge with Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle. In my opinion, the best opening match for a SummerSlam pay-per-view in WWE history. One of the greatest opening matches in the entire history of WWE on pay-per-view. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. We're actually just watching SummerSlam 2002 not too long ago. Just kind of randomly came upon it. And it opened great. It finished strong. The people on Long Island really turned on the Rock, but they really got behind Brock and really wanted him to ascend to the top of the mountain, and he did. You had a really, like you said, solid show from beginning to end, and the crowd just ate everything up. You had the return of Shawn Michaels, which we thought would never happen. Absolutely. And he had an unbelievable return against Triple H in that street fight, or unsanctioned street fight. It was just a feat of nature how Shawn had come back like nothing had ever happened to him.
Yeah, that storyline was incredible. And in my opinion, that match is right up there among the all-time greatest SummerSlam matches. Triple H and Shawn Michaels tore the house down. And The Rock and Brock Lesnar was great as well, and that was Brock Lesnar's rise to the very top in WWE, and just a very solid card. You had so many talented people on that show, from RVD to Eddie Guerrero to Ric Flair. It was really a star-studded card from start to finish. I mean, that was really amazing, the talent that they had.
People forget about the Rob Van Dam Chris Benoit match tonight because Chris Benoit is a taboo subject, but that match between RVD and Benoit was for the Intercontinental Championship, was for brand supremacy, for title supremacy, and for sheer pride. And those two just really tore the Nassau Coliseum down.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at that entire card, to me, whenever somebody asks me name the best SummerSlam pay-per-view of all time, I go with 2002, no questions asked.
As do I.
All right. So coming in at number 3. This was a really strong pay-per-view, but I'm not sure if I would put it at number 3. The 1998 SummerSlam, which was headlined by Steve Austin versus The Undertaker. This was the Highway to Hell pay-per-view. I think this pay-per-view's ranked so high because of the fact that it was during the peak of the Attitude Era, and I thought Austin versus Undertaker was a really strong main event. And you also had The Rock versus Triple H in the ladder match, which I loved that match. To me, that was a match that really put The Rock and Triple H on the map in WWE. And after that match was over, everyone knew these two guys were going to be major superstars. It was a career-defining moment for both guys, and that whole feud leading up to it with the Nation and DX was awesome. But beyond that, the rest of the card to me was just okay. What are your thoughts overall on that pay-per-view?
I agree with everything you said. Highway to Hell was an unbelievable build-up. You had Undertaker, who had felt he'd been jobbed out of title shots left and right, and finally got his opportunity and elected to go it alone. He sent him and Kane had been revealed to be in cahoots, and he sent Kane in the back, and then it was an unbelievable main event, like you said, and the undercard, not so solid except for the Rock Triple H match. And like you said, Rock and Triple H proved that both of them were ready to ascend. By the end of the following year, both of them had been multi-time WWF champions.
Right.
So it really, within a year of that SummerSlam, the following SummerSlam night after that on Raw with Triple H anyway, both of them had been WWF champions. So it really signified a change in the guard where Austin was still your guy, but you had Rock and Triple H nipping at his heels really, really quickly.
Yeah, so from a storyline perspective, that was definitely one of the stronger SummerSlam pay-per-views. And the two main event matches really delivered. Like 2013, it was the two main event matches that really sold the show.
Exactly.
Coming in at number 4 was from 2011 at Staples Center, headlined by John Cena versus CM Punk. Now, to me, this was probably the second best Staples Center SummerSlam, but still, I'm not sure if I would say it was the 4th all-time greatest SummerSlam. I thought Cena and Punk was very good, but not at the level of Money in the Bank. The other big match on that show was Randy Orton versus Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship, which was a really good match, and that was the end of their feud, which was an awesome feud. So once again, the two big matches really carried the pay-per-view. Everything else from 2011 I thought was fairly forgettable. And of course the ending with Kevin Nash coming out, the crowd just went nuts, and Del Rio cashing in Money in the Bank. So that was another big moment to end that SummerSlam. So it did end on a really strong note. Any thoughts you want to add for that SummerSlam?
Well, we'll get to 2010 later because there's a story of 2010 with you and I. But coming off that year, the following year, it was awesome. I remember SummerSlam being the first real family wrestling outing for Dylan, because the three of us, myself, his mom and him, went to that SummerSlam, sat in the cheap seats, and he was like 3 years old, but he kind of got it, and it was cool to see a Punk Cena rematch. Like you said, nowhere near as good as their match in Chicago, but it was still very, very well done. You had Orton and Christian with the blow-off to their feud after a despicable match at Money in the Bank where Christian literally spit in Orton's face and sent him off the deep end. That was the grossest thing I've ever seen in wrestling. Literally, it's nasty. But SummerSlam, like has been the pattern, it seems like, for most of the big four, shall we say, there's one, maybe two, even possibly three big show-making matches, and then the rest was just kind of like, eh.
Yeah, exactly. This was Dylan's first WWE event?
Not the first event, definitely first pay-per-view. I'm trying to remember if he went to a show prior to
WWE before that.
I'm trying to remember.
All right, well,
he won't remember because he was too young.
All right, you can think about that for a minute here.
Okay.
Let's move on. Next up on the list, number 5, 2008, headlined by Undertaker versus Edge, Hell in the Cell. I thought that this was an awesome Hell in the Cell match. This was the first pay-per-view of the PG era, so this match was a little bit watered down, but still pretty intense match, and there was even the point where they both went through the cell wall, and it had its moments. I really thought the end was over the top with Undertaker literally sending Edge to hell. That was a bit ridiculous, but it's the Undertaker, and the Undertaker's known for doing all that over the top stuff, so I accept it for what it is. You also had John Cena versus Batista, which was surprisingly a really good match. I mean, I think a lot of people were not expecting that match to be as good as it was, but they tore the house down. That was a really strong match. You had the big angle with Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho, with Shawn's wife getting punched by mistake by Jericho. So this pay-per-view definitely had some big moments, but again, I'm not sure if I would put it in the top 5. What do you think?
Like we've been saying for the last few minutes, a 2 or 3 segment show does not make a 3-hour pay-per-view. And that's what SummerSlam 2008 was. You had Hell in a Cell, which was built up for well over a year, really. And then you had Cena, Batista, the 2 top stars of the Ruthless Aggression brand extension era, whatever you want to call it. And then you had the Shawn Michaels Chris Jericho segment. It was a decent show, but nowhere near where it should be top 5.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Here's a pay-per-view coming in at number 6 that I felt should have been way higher. Maybe number 2, number 3, number 4, somewhere a couple spots higher. From 2000, which was headlined by The Rock versus Triple H versus Kurt Angle. This was the match where Kurt Angle had gotten hurt early on. Triple H was doing the pedigree on the table, and the table collapsed early on. Kurt Angle had to go to the back. He came back out, and I think Kurt Angle coming back out and sticking it out and finishing the match is one of the reasons that WWE felt confident in him and making him the world champion, because of that performance and going out there and finishing the match. But also the incredible TLC match between the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian. One of my all-time favorite matches from any WWE pay-per-view. That's an all-time classic. And Steve Blackman versus Shane McMahon with Shane taking that big fall. That was a spectacular moment at SummerSlam. And even some entertaining stuff. You had that moment with Taz and Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. So yeah, you had a lot of fun stuff on this show. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a really good Attitude Era pay-per-view, a really good solid performance by everybody involved. Kurt Angle, even back then, was a freaking machine. Really gets a concussion in the first 5 minutes of the show, or the first 5 minutes of the match, and he comes back out and does the finish with his bell completely freaking wrong. He was Looney Tunes, gone bye-bye. Unbelievable. And like you said, he was world champion within 2 months of that pay-per-view.
Yeah, I really feel like that is what made the company confident in him, and they felt that they could invest in him as the champion, because he was able to prove himself that he was one tough son of a bitch. I think when a guy gets hurt like that and comes back out and finishes, I think that wins that person over with Vince. I really do feel that if you could prove your toughness like that, Vince is sold on you for life. Well, at least until...
And you will never see something like that again.
At least until your body completely breaks down and, you have to leave the company. But, while he was there, I mean, Kurt Angle just proved in that match that he was the real deal. He was as tough as anybody in the company. Ever. Yeah,
and then you had the unbelievable, the first ever truly named TLC match. You had a Triangle Ladder match at WrestleMania that year. The TLC's debut at SummerSlam was a sight to behold. Mick Foley, Vince McMahon always called, Bischoff always called his cruiserweights the car crash of WCW. Well, these guys were the car crash in WWF in the year 2000. These 6 guys, these 3 teams, really made tag team wrestling in the WWF worth watching again. And then, yeah, Shane McMahon is certifiable.
Yeah.
He's just nuts. He's cuckoo. How can a executive of a company, even back then, in the young shape he was in then, he did it this year?
Yeah,
for Christ's sakes.
I know.
He's nuts.
Yeah, that was
totally nuts.
That was a sick moment. So yeah, just a really entertaining pay-per-view. Coming in at number 7, 2009, the first Staples Center SummerSlam pay-per-view, headlined by CM Punk versus Jeff Hardy, TLC match. Very good match. I loved the storyline between the two of them. And, that was the end of their feud, almost the end of their feud. I believe they had a cage match the next week, which was Jeff Hardy's official send-off. And then CM Punk came out dressed up as Jeff Hardy. Classic moment. But yeah, this was when CM Punk was really starting to become a big deal in WWE. And then Undertaker came out at the end of this pay-per-view. So, you had another big moment to close out this show. But really, beyond this match, I wasn't really thrilled with this pay-per-view. I thought John Cena versus Randy Orton was good, but by this point, I was already sick of Orton versus Cena. They had Mike DiBiase, Ted DiBiase's brother, come in, pretending to be a fan, and then there was no follow-up on that. I felt, this pay-per-view also had Great Khali versus Kane. The opening match with Dolph Ziggler and Rey Mysterio was good. But beyond that, to me, this was a very forgettable SummerSlam. So I'm a little surprised it ranked this high.
I believe it was Brett DiBiase. I think Mike was Ted's father, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, if I screwed that up, I apologize.
No worry, yeah, it was Brett. And then you forget DX came back against Legacy on the big tank, the big entrance.
How can I forget about that? Wow. Yeah, that was a great entrance with the tank. So yeah, I mean, this was a good pay-per-view, but I wouldn't put it in the top 10, I don't think.
Yeah, it was good, not great. It definitely doesn't belong in the top 10. What I remember most about this is, what you said was that CM Punk was becoming a big deal. CM Punk himself will agree that he wasn't made to look like a big deal, because within 2 months he was back being buried by the Undertaker for the World Championship, and then he went back into obscurity until he formed the Straight Edge Society a couple months later.
Right.
So there were a couple months there after that feud with the Undertaker where he was just languishing again.
Yeah.
So CM Punk, I like CM Punk in his entire WWE career, but he really didn't make his name, firmly establish himself in the E until he turned heel and joined the Straight Edge Society a couple months, formed the Straight Edge Society after the Jeff Hardy feud. That made his name, and then, of course, the big storyline in 2011. But here, you had Jeff Hardy, who I will never, ever forget. Jeff Hardy, much like Kurt Angle 3 years prior, taking time off to get right with himself and his head and the drugs and everything, and then boom, he's in TNA.
Right, exactly.
I thought that was complete horse shit.
Yeah, that was definitely a big shock when he showed up just completely random on the first Monday Night Impact. But yeah, that was a surprise. Overall, I thought this was a good pay-per-view, but not one of the best.
No.
Next up here, we have the 2004 SummerSlam, which surprises me as well. I would not rank it this high. It was headlined by Chris Benoit versus Randy Orton. Great main event, and it was Randy Orton's first title reign, although, as far as WWE is concerned, Randy Orton just found the World Heavyweight Championship lying in the ring and claimed it as his own. And that's the story. So, this is a forgotten SummerSlam, I think, because of Chris Benoit being in the main event.
Yeah, apparently the world title went missing at WrestleMania, and Randy Orton found it in the middle of the ring at SummerSlam, just happened to be there. So yeah, that's awesome for it that he came upon the big gold belt. God bless him for it. No, the match itself was very well done. Chris and Randy told a very good story, but off the top of my head, I remember a JBL Undertaker story.
That match was very disappointing. JBL did not deliver on pay-per-view, in my opinion, when he was champion.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what did Paul say at One Night Stand?
Yeah,
just saying.
Because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays.
Exactly. He was only champion for one reason. Yeah. Other than that, I can't remember a single thing from the pay-per-view.
I remember the crowd was very, that's when the phrase Bizarro Land really became common in WWE because the crowd was cheering all the bad guys and booing the baby faces. If Roman Reigns was wrestling back then, he would have been in a lot of trouble.
Well, they were in Toronto, which is why it's Bizarro Land, because it was up in Canada.
I remember them doing the wave during JBL and the Undertaker. So the crowd was just bored with that match.
Well, as even back then, Undertaker was starting to slow down. Let's be honest, and JBL was never anything beyond marginal skill. So yeah, they're gonna totally shit on that match.
Yeah. I'm struggling to remember anything from that pay-per-view. So yeah, this being number 8, I don't get it. I don't know why it's right.
Send us feedback, people. Let us know why you made it number 8, please. We're dying to know.
Yeah, there must be something great that we're completely missing. Triple H versus Eugene. That match was meh. Would have been funny if Eugene won, but of course he's not going to beat Triple H. Triple H ain't jobbing to Eugene.
Triple H ain't jobbing back and except the Benoit.
Yeah. So think about that. Eugene was in one of the headline matches of that SummerSlam. I know you were never a fan of the Eugene gimmick.
I wasn't for very personal reasons.
All right, so next up we have the 2003 SummerSlam, which was headlined by the Elimination Chamber. I hated the booking of this match. Goldberg was on fire. He was on his way to being the old Goldberg. He came out there. He was destroying people. The crowd was going absolutely nuts. And then one sledgehammer shot, and the match is over. Goldberg loses. To me, this really killed Goldberg's momentum in WWE when he had the chance to get red hot again. And I just, because of that, I was never a fan of this Elimination Chamber match. And overall, I thought this pay-per-view was okay. Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle was really good. But beyond that, I mean, I once again, I struggled to remember most of what happened on this pay-per-view card. Is there anything that stands out to you from this SummerSlam?
No. The Chamber match, disappointed. Like you said, Goldberg was being built up finally as the old Goldberg, WCW Goldberg, this huge, raging monster, and obliterated everybody in his path in the Chamber, and then Evolution screws him over. And whatever he did after getting the next month, he was dead in the water his entire world title reign in WWE. For that 2 months he was champion, or 3 months, whatever he was champion, Triple H, as he was accused of doing often back then, just buried Goldberg.
Right. All right, so let's move on here to 1992. Now, in my opinion, the main event of this, Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for the IC title, to me, this was better than anything from 2009, 2004, and 2003. So this should be number 7 at least, if not higher. This match, one of the all-time greatest SummerSlam matches in history. The match that really put Bret Hart on the map in WWE. I mean, there were several matches, but this is the one where I felt that Bret became a bigger star losing than winning. When he lost this match, I think that this was the match that, once again, Vince saw this match and he figured that Bret Hart was the guy he could rely on to be the champion. And this was a really critical moment in Bret's career, even in a losing effort. And just British Bulldog winning the title in his home country. 80,000 people. I believe it was, at the time, the legitimate record attendance-wise, more than WrestleMania 3, which was a worked number. But yeah, this was just an incredible show because of the atmosphere. You had some fun moments on this show, like Shawn Michaels and the Model fighting over Sherry. You had an entertaining undercard. Even Undertaker versus Kamala was entertaining, with Kamala being terrified of Undertaker and Undertaker's entrance. I thought this was a good show. And of course, not Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage and Ultimate Warrior having their rematch from WrestleMania 7. The one negative to me was Flair should have been in a match. For him to just be out there not competing in a match was just a waste of Flair. But beyond that, I really enjoyed this SummerSlam, for the novelty at least of being in Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, it was a decent show. The main event was Bret himself said on his DVD that came out when he came back to WWE. He said, "All right," Vince said, "All right, you guys are on last. Show me," and they showed him.
Yeah.
They both went every effort, and they showed Vince that they could be in the main event. And Brett was champion by what, the following 2 months? Again, 2 months later, the guy's a world champion.
Yeah.
So that was that match and his match with Kurt Hennig the year before solidified Brett's status as the guy. Yes, Hogan was still there for most of Brett's Intercontinental Championship reigns, but Brett was already going to be Vince's guy. It was already happening.
Right.
And that match with Davey Boy was something special. And yeah, the Model and Shawn Michaels match, that was hysterical. Sherry fainting, and the whole thing was funny. Undertaker entrance was really cool. People forget because it's been downplayed because of Hawk's condition, but the biker entrance from the LOD, that was awesome too. Except for Rocco being on the bike, that was kind of stupid. But
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, we all did back then. We were 8.
Yeah.
So you know.
Yeah, and the crowd was really hot too, so it made for a fun show. All right, next up we have the 1997 SummerSlam. This was a good show. Bret Hart versus The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the referee. I really enjoyed the storyline with this match. If Shawn lost, if Bret lost, he would never wrestle in the United States again. And Shawn said if he favored The Undertaker, he would never wrestle again. Of course, the big angle with Shawn hitting Undertaker with the chair and having to count the fall and award the title to his arch enemy Bret Hart. I loved the storyline of this match. Great storytelling. You had Mankind versus Triple H in the cage, and then he did the big jump off the top like Jimmy Snuka. This was a fun show, and of course Steve Austin versus Owen Hart. The unfortunate incident with Austin getting hurt. But able to somehow finish the match, even though it looked really bad. But still a historic moment in WWE with Austin getting hurt and just really proving his toughness and being able to leave on his own 2 feet rather than be carried out on a stretcher. So really an incredible moment.
Yeah, the Meadowlands was always a hotbed for WWF crowds back then, and the 1997 SummerSlam was awesome. Great Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, that whole mixture of the 3 top guys in the company at the time. And it led us down the path toward Montreal, let's be honest. But it also led to an unbelievable series of matches with Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, Hell in a Cell, leading up to that. Austin and Owen were really catching fire, and they caught fire at SummerSlam, and they continued on until the Survivor Series that year, also in Montreal. And just, it was a solid effort by the WWF. Mankind / Dude Love against Triple H was really, really good. Foley almost got his head taken off by a China cage shut, but these guys are badass. They're tough. Austin gets up from a broken neck, finishes the match. Foley gets up from a damn near concussion, finishes the match.
Yeah, so it was a fun show overall from start to finish.
Yes. Yes.
And then of course Brian Pillman and Goldust and British Bulldog and Ken Shamrock with Shamrock snapping. I enjoyed the undercard as well. I thought it was a very solid show.
The Hart Foundation in that year helped the WWF through a very difficult period.
Yeah, definitely, when they were struggling against WCW. All right, next up we have the 2014 SummerSlam from 2 years ago, headlined by John Cena versus Brock Lesnar. I enjoyed the match live, but it really doesn't have much replay value. It's basically just Brock Lesnar suplexing John Cena and beating him one-sided. I like it, but it's not a match you really can watch over and over again unless you enjoy watching John Cena get destroyed. So some people out there might find enjoyment in watching it repeatedly. Other than that, this was not a bad show, but I definitely felt it was a step down from 2013's SummerSlam. What did you think of the show overall?
Well, it's probably AJ Styles' favorite John Cena match, because what did Brock do for 20 minutes?
Beat up John Cena.
Beat up John Cena, that's right. Yeah, we were sitting in the suite, Ryan and I, your friend Ryan and I were sitting in the suite watching those suplexes over and over. And literally the crowd is just getting quiet because John's getting his ass literally handed to him on a platter. It wasn't a match. It wasn't pretty. It was just a beat down from start to finish. I've never seen a more dominant one-sided championship match in my entire time of going to see WWE live or to watch on pay-per-view. It was unbelievable. But other than that, what really happened that year?
Not a lot. I'm struggling to remember the matches on this show. Yeah, to me, this was an average show. So, maybe a few spots down. Next up, we have 2015, which was headlined by The Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. I wasn't really a huge fan of this match because I felt that Undertaker, if he just wanted revenge on Brock Lesnar, he should have done so way sooner. Why wait a year and a half to get his revenge? It was just completely random. And I wasn't a big fan of the finish with, the confusion with the referee and the tap out and all that stuff. It was just a cheap way to have Brock Lesnar lose the match. Just wasn't really a big fan of it. I mean, the match itself, up until the finish, I thought was great. I thought they definitely redeemed themselves from WrestleMania 30. What do you think? Yeah,
the match far and wide eclipsed the match quality of WrestleMania 30. These two guys both went out there and both handed it to each other. WrestleMania, Brock and Undertaker's ass for the whole match. It was ugly. The finishes, again, were also very different. The finish at 30 was the most shocking thing to ever happen in WWE, other than the deaths. SummerSlam, it was a hokey, convoluted bullshit finish that did not sell me on seeing the rematches going forward. I did not even really care to see Hell in a Cell against Undertaker and Brock Lesnar. I didn't really care to watch because it didn't matter to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you also had John Cena versus Seth Rollins, which I thought was a really good match, and Cena got screwed out of the title again, as he usually does. He something has to get in John Cena's way, and he was going to break the record, too. But luckily we had a certain celebrity who decided he wasn't going to let that happen.
I like Jon Stewart as much as the next guy, but my goodness, was that finish hokey, too.
All I know is every time John Cena goes for the WWE title now, he better show up, because if he's that serious, they better have that storyline continue and not act like it never happened. He better show up for every single John Cena title match and just make it a running thing, just like when Pete Rose would show up at all those WrestleManias. They really need to do that.
Yes, I agree.
This was a good show. Brooklyn crowd was hot, and Kevin Owens, I believe, against Cesaro, right?
I want to say yes, but you know what? I honestly remember NXT Brooklyn more than I do SummerSlam.
That is true. I mean, that was a more memorable show overall, I thought, at least. But yeah, this was still a solid show. Next up, number 14, 1999, Steve Austin versus Triple H versus Mankind, out-of-body experience with Jesse Ventura as the special referee. This was entertaining with Jesse Ventura being there. And Mankind winning the title, and then Triple H winning it the next night. This was a good match, but the match, in my opinion, that really stole the show on this SummerSlam was Shane McMahon versus Test, which was something I was not expecting going in for that match to be as great as it was. I mean, that match really showcased Shane that he could do a bunch of crazy stuff and made Test this huge babyface. And up until the Triple H Stephanie wedding, Test was going to be a major babyface in WWE, and I felt they really blew it with him, actually. This match I thought was great.
Yeah. The match with Shane McMahon and Test really put Test on the map and really showed Shane's aggressive side, but also his softer side, because once he lost the match fair and square to Test, he shook Test's hand and said, okay, you've got my blessing. There's my sister. There you go. And it really put Test in the main event circle for some time, up until the wedding at Staples Center, of course. And then he got buried. But yeah, the triple threat out-of-body experience, I really remember Jesse Ventura more than I do the match, because Jesse threw Shane over the top rope. That was for your old man, you little bastard.
That was great.
It was like, oh, God, Jesse, you can't say bastard. You can't
well,
say
this was
that.
during the Attitude Era. He could say whatever he wanted.
Well, right, but he was the governor. You can't say bastard as the governor of Minnesota. You can't do that.
It makes him a badass governor.
Exactly. So it was just funny. Riding Austin out with the injury, because he had hit to come off of the injury that he had, the knee injury, which was why the show that was inserted in the first place, was very well done. Triple H really went nuts and really showed his aggressive dark side leading into the match the next night on Raw, where he literally broke JR's arm to get what he wanted, and he got the title. But the match itself at SummerSlam was pretty good.
Yeah. All right, next up we have 2006. I thought this was a really strong show. I mean, I might rank this one a few spots higher. You had John Cena versus Edge in the main event, which I do feel was a bit of a disappointing main event. It was more or less just continuing their storyline. And, the Unforgiven match they had a month later I thought was definitely a superior match. But yeah, I thought that Hogan versus Randy Orton was very entertaining. And, that was a novelty of seeing Hogan and Orton go at it. You had Mick Foley versus Ric Flair, which I felt was a really good match between those two and violent. I mean, that was definitely one of the more violent matches of that period. I thought that this SummerSlam was pretty entertaining overall. What did you think of this pay-per-view?
Again, we keep saying the word solid effort, but it really was a good show overall by WWE. Like you said, Cena and Edge was good. Mick Foley and Ric Flair surprised me. Legitimately surprised me at how over-the-top, violent, bloody, the whole thing. It was something. And for these two old guys to go in there and just tear the house down, it surprised me, but it was really, really good. Hogan, Orton, people look back and they look at Hogan and Michaels from 2005, and then they look at Hogan, Orton, 2006, they go, damn, Terry, what the hell happened in a year?
They didn't have a guy to sell like crazy for him?
Yeah. The build-up was bad for this match. The whole Brooke liking Randy liking Brooke thing, that was so hokey. The RKO and the limbo, that was stupid. And the match itself just did not deliver. I give the Hogan's knee was more beat up than it was a year prior, but like you just said, you had the guy who could sell a stack of chairs to the Lazy Boy factory versus Randy Orton the next year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good show, but yeah, it wasn't one of the better SummerSlams. 2001. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I'm looking at the list here that you have in front of me, and I'm noticing that, as we get lower, the years get older, but I think some of the older ones may be better than the ones we're looking at now.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a few minutes here. There's some of those early SummerSlams that I feel are criminally underrated, and we'll get to that in a minute here.
Yes.
2012, Triple H versus Brock Lesnar main event. Oh, actually, I'm going way ahead of myself here. Let's go back a minute. 2001, number 16, headlined by The Rock versus Booker T for the WCW title. Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle for the WWE title. I really wasn't a big fan of the booking for this pay-per-view. I wasn't really enjoying the Invasion storyline at this point. I felt it was already going downhill. The WCW guys were getting buried. The Rock beat Booker T. I remember DDP and Kanyon getting jobbed out to The Undertaker and Kane, which I wasn't a fan of. And Austin and Kurt Angle just ended in a screw job finish to build up to the next pay-per-view. This SummerSlam to me was disappointing. I watched it back then and I was let down by it. So what did you think of this pay-per-view?
I think I'm one of the few people, and you may be in this list too, and we haven't talked much about this in the years we've been together as far as doing these crazy shows, but I was a fan of the Alliance. Not the storyline itself that they were involved in, but the idea behind it. And I really wanted to see the WCW, ECW invaders really give the WWF their comeuppance. And SummerSlam, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The Alliance needed to look strong, and they should have dominated this pay-per-view. But I wasn't a fan of Austin going back heel and being the Alliance's leader. That was dumb. So I that made it hard for me to enjoy the match with Angle, even though those guys worked really well together and they had a great match. I did not like the storytelling with this Invasion storyline at this point. It really hurt the show for me personally.
That was the whole problem with every pay-per-view from like June until Survivor Series.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the Invasion storyline just hindered matchmaking and match production because the booking and the storylines were just so damn hokey.
Yeah. I will say, I actually thought the best match on this show, was RVD versus Jeff Hardy. I thought that was a great match.
easily, and that's a testament to Rob Van Dam. I'm not trying to blow smoke at my friend's ass here, but he constantly, continually, consistently delivers. And he was the most over guy in the alliance, more so than Austin, because Austin was not really alliance. He was a WWF guy who turned bad just to be part of the alliance. RVD was the only really homegrown alliance guy who really got over, and he had match after match after match that whole summer and in the early fall.
Yeah, that match to me was the most entertaining thing about this entire show, looking back, you know. All right, so let's move on.
Definitely, absolutely.
Let's move on here to number 17, 2005, Hulk Hogan versus Shawn Michaels. We talked about it earlier. I love the storyline leading up to this match. I thought it was awesome. And the match itself, Shawn Michaels was just such a great heel. I mean, he was spectacular. And he was bumping like crazy. You know, people saying he was overselling for Hogan, but it made for a very entertaining match. And this pay-per-view was pretty entertaining, but I did have some issues with it. I thought Matt Hardy and Edge was really disappointing. They just basically had Edge beat Matt Hardy fairly quickly. That should have been Matt Hardy's moment to really shine, you know, coming off of that whole storyline where he was fired from the company and brought back and lost his woman. They could have really made Matt Hardy something special. I was disappointed in that. And, you had Chris Benoit versus Orlando Jordan, which went 20 seconds or something, which I actually thought was entertaining, but I know a lot of people were hoping for like a lengthy match between those two. So I could see where some people would complain. What did you think of this pay-per-view?
Yeah, the Jordan-Benoit match, Orlando Jordan's too good an athlete to be jobbed out in 25 seconds. That was ridiculous. That was horrible. I did like the Matt Hardy-Edge storyline going into SummerSlam. However, much like Jeff Hardy self-destructed himself, it seemed as though the company was itching to just keep burying Matt. No matter how many times they went to bat with him, they always seemed to have him come up short at the big scenario. SummerSlam's the second biggest show of the year. He's facing the guy who literally stole his woman and cost him his job. And he comes up short because of blood loss, and there wasn't that much blood loss to begin with.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
You had that.
I also wanted to add John Cena versus Chris Jericho. I thought was a really good match. And that had a hot crowd, too. They were chanting, let's go Cena, let's go Jericho, or Y2J, whatever. That was a really fun match.
Yeah, it wasn't quite let's go Cena sucks shit. It was let's go Cena, let's go Y2J, whatever it was. It was back and forth between both guys, not just focused on Cena one way or the other, which was so good back then. I wish they had more stuff like that now where it was let's go Cena, let's go the other guy, not just Cena sucks. Because that's the whole problem of the E right there. Hogan Michaels, easily Hogan's best individual SummerSlam effort.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
I think it's only actually besides Orton.
I mean, Shawn did an incredible job running into Hogan's foot. Let's face it. This was a fun.
You know what? It made Hogan like $1 million.
Yeah, it did. This was a fun pay-per-view. Okay, number 18 now, 2012. Triple H versus Brock Lesnar was the main event. I thought it was really disappointing. For some reason, I felt that Triple H and Brock Lesnar never really worked well together. I think their best match was maybe their last match, the cage match, I think, at Extreme Rules, the third match of the series. I wasn't a fan of it the first time, and the WrestleMania match, they tried at the WrestleMania. Did I just say WrestleMania 30? I meant 29. They tried to have a good match, but the crowd just didn't care. The SummerSlam match I thought was really disappointing. You had a triple threat with Big Show, CM Punk, and John Cena, which, to me was just a match. And I really don't remember much else from this pay-per-view. I thought this one was pretty disappointing. Anything you remember from this SummerSlam?
Well, you gotta figure CM Punk's SummerSlam history was 2010 Big Show, 2011 Cena, 2012 Cena,
and Big Show.
Skip a year. We could get Lesnar. And then 2014, both of them. So he knows how to beat Cena and Big Show at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
So, it just, it was bad. But the match we're talking about between Lesnar and Triple H, easily the second best of the three, because you had the cage match, which you said, which actually was delivered rather well. The match at SummerSlam was okay, but it was still very much more one-sided than your average Triple H back and forth give and take.
Yeah. So yeah, this pay-per-view I thought was pretty disappointing. Not really surprised with its ranking here. Next up, we have 2007, which I'm actually surprised this is not lower. I thought that this was one of the worst SummerSlam pay-per-views in history. Literally, in my opinion, the best thing about this SummerSlam was a backstage segment with Vince McMahon, William Regal, and Crime Time. And you had everybody dancing and Vince just getting frustrated, and even Regal was dancing with Crime Time. To me, this was the funniest thing on this entire show and the most entertaining thing on this entire show. John Cena versus Randy Orton, I thought was just very average. And everything else on this show was, to me, forgettable. I would say it's one of the worst SummerSlam pay-per-views.
Would you agree that Cena's last 6 months of that championship reign was about disappointing as that SummerSlam? Because what did he do? He faced Khali about 1 million times. He faced Umaga a couple times. You know, it wasn't good. And the fact that he faced Orton, I get that they came up together. I get they mesh well together. But we don't want to see the same match over and over and over and over again until we're ready to puke. And it was so worn out that it took Cena literally tearing the peck off of his shoulder, off of his chest, to get something refreshing out of Randy Orton.
No, I totally agree. And, Great Khali was the world champion by this point also. So that's really enough said. I felt that was just ridiculous. I think the build-up to that match was the basketball. You remember that when Batista mentioned the basketball? Because Great Khali squashed the basketball, and Batista said, "You're not going to get in the ring with a basketball. Basketballs don't hold grudges." Do you remember that promo?
I don't at all. I'm glad I don't.
That was funny for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, that's the best I could say about that entire feud with Batista and Khali. Coming in at number 20 from 1996, the main event was Shawn Michaels versus Vader. This was a good match, although it was a bit of a train wreck at times. You had the match being stopped by DQ, and then Jim Cornette, having the match restarted, and I think it got ended in a count out, and then it got restarted, and then eventually Shawn just won the match. To me, Vader could have actually had a decent run as world champion. I think a lot of people were expecting Vader to win the title here. He was pretty hot as a heel, and he significantly cooled off after this match. So to me, that was a bad booking decision. Vader should have gotten a shot to be the world champion for a while and be the dominant heel. And you had the big moment with Paul Bearer turning on the Undertaker, the first Boiler Room Brawl. That was an entertaining match. But beyond that, to me, this was a pretty forgettable SummerSlam. What did you think?
Agreed. And the fact that most of the Boiler Room Brawl was taped the night before with no commentary, no anything for them to play off of was a testament to Undertaker and Mick Foley's abilities to get things done in the ring and outside of the ring. The moment with Paul Bearer still resonates to me. It still resonates to everybody that Paul Bearer, the Undertaker's closest confidant for almost 6 years, would over 5 years, 5.5 years, whatever it was, would dare to defy the Phenom, and he did. And it led to some serious TV with Mankind and a little brief thing with Terry Gordy, and then, of course, Kane coming in. But that moment at SummerSlam 96 was the catalyst for the emergence of Kane and everything that happened after that with Paul Bearer, Kane, and The Undertaker throughout their entire storyline over the last, whatever it's been now, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Something awesome. And then Michaels and Undertaker, Michaels and Vader, excuse me. Sorry, I'm being distracted by a text coming from my mother. I apologize. It was okay. Like you said, the match it was very convoluted, very hokey, very the continued non-finishes were very, very lame in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Cornette was entertaining in his role, but yeah, I was just I felt Vader should have gotten the title on that night. Next up, we have from 1990, the number 21 SummerSlam from 1990. Main event was Ultimate Warrior versus Rick Rude. Trivia note: Rick Rude's only WWE pay-per-view main event inside a steel cage. I thought this was an entertaining match, and to me, this is an underrated show because you had one of the best SummerSlam matches of the golden era, in my opinion. Hart Foundation versus Demolition, 2 out of 3 falls. I loved that match, and I still do. I think it's a great match. You had the Road Warriors coming out at the end to stop the cheating from the 3 members of Demolition, and Hart Foundation winning the titles. Great moment. I really enjoyed this match a lot. To me, this match alone puts this SummerSlam way higher than 21. It should definitely be up several spots higher. And Hogan making his comeback against Earthquake. I love the storyline. People are going to say, oh, it's just Hulk Hogan and Earthquake. It's nothing special. But I thought it was a great storyline with Earthquake putting Hogan out of action for several months and Hogan making his big comeback. And then, of course, you had Sapphire joining Ted DiBiase. Another great storyline with Dusty Rhodes and, Randy Savage coming out there. This was a great show. I really enjoyed this SummerSlam. This should be way higher than 21, in my opinion.
Yeah. Way, way higher. Easily my favorite of the Hogan era SummerSlams, the early ones. Solid main event, cage match, Rude Warrior. It's Warrior. It's not going to be anything pretty or special, but they still put on a great match. Rude was vastly underrated as a talent by the WWF, in my opinion. That's why WCW shot him to the moon as United States Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah.
Hogan Earthquake, the storyline was good. The match itself was a Hogan match against the big guy, so it is what it is. But the storyline was damn near breathtaking because I came into watching just after this storyline had concluded for the most part. So I wasn't really a Hulkamaniac during his convalescence at home after the Attack on Brother Love show. So I didn't know about that until years later and went, whoa, this was heavy.
Yeah.
So very well done. 2 out of 3 falls. You can't go wrong with the Hart Foundation and Demolition. Demolition wasn't the greatest tag team on the planet, but they knew how to hold the championships, knew how to defend the championships well, and the Harts were easily the best tag team on the planet after the dissolution of the British Bulldogs. So, great match. LOD getting involved. We should have led to more between the LOD and Demolition. Didn't happen that way, which sucked. But, solid show overall.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, we have 2010 SummerSlam, which... I would say this belongs at number 22. I know a lot of people hated the finish of the main event, Team Cena versus Team Nexus, with John Cena prevailing in the end. A lot of people felt Nexus should have won. Being there live, everyone was happy with Cena winning, believe it or not. He did get a mixed reaction, but with the way the match was booked, the crowd was satisfied with that finish. Looking back in hindsight, I think it was a mistake. It definitely hurt Nexus a bit, but I really feel what happened in Survivor Series was worse for Wade Barrett than what happened at SummerSlam. They could have done more with Nexus. Overall, this show was all right, but again, not a lot that was noteworthy. You had CM Punk versus Big Show, as we mentioned earlier. I think it was a handicap match, right? It was the 3 Straight Edge Society members against Big Show.
It was a society...
And Big Show still won.
It was Joey and Luke and Punk against Big Show. And Big Show still won, yeah.
Yeah, Kane versus Rey Mysterio with Undertaker returning and then getting beat up by Kane, which was weird. And I'm trying to remember what else happened on this show. I mean, not really a lot. I mean, Randy Orton versus Sheamus was
Randy Orton versus Sheamus for the millionth time.
Yeah.
It started with...
this was actually a pretty
started with
pay-per-view, in my opinion.
It started with Kofi and Ziggler, and then Nexus interfered in that match.
Yeah, I just felt this was probably. Yeah, I would say this was the worst of the Staples Center SummerSlams for sure. I wasn't a big fan of this one.
Yeah,
but the main event.
I remember a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, you were way up there in the cheap seats for that one. I had to like take a picture of you way up there.
I sat up there. Yeah, I sat up there, and in my absence from the rest of the No DQ crowd, I tweeted out there saying, "Hey guys, I'm here, and if you want to come see me, come visit." And they came to visit with alcohol in their hands each time they came to visit. So I ended up going to Bob's to tape the No DQ post show for Talk Wrestling. The first ever HD Talk Wrestling lit off my gourd. I was so messed up. I had to carry me through the show.
I think you made like a homophobic remark too during that video, and you got a lot of heat for it. But you were pretty drunk.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, everyone go back and watch that Talk Wrestling HD with Jeff and Noah recapping SummerSlam 2010. That's a fun one. Next up, we have
if you want to go back on No DQ on the YouTube, it's the one after 125.
Yeah, Talk Wrestling HD SummerSlam. You'll find it. Coming in at number 23 from 1988, Mega Powers versus Mega Bucks. I can understand why this pay-per-view was not ranked that high because there were a lot of filler matches. You know, the card didn't really have a lot of strong storylines. The big storyline was, of course, the main event with Jesse Ventura being in the back pocket of Ted DiBiase. The main event was very entertaining. But other than that, I mean, you know, this was the first SummerSlam. You know, you did have the Ultimate Warrior beating the Honky Tonk Man in, 15, 20 seconds, whatever it was. That was a fun moment. But beyond that, you know, this was a very forgettable show, you know, for the first SummerSlam. Not a lot beyond the main event and Warrior winning the IC title. What do you think?
And the highlight of Superstar Billy Graham being the color commentator, that was always a classic too.
Well, that was entertaining. I liked Billy Graham as the commentator. I thought he was entertaining. But, you know, yeah, this show had a lot of throwaway matches, you know, like Ken Patera and Don Morocco and Junkyard Dog, all those guys at the end of their WWF runs, just in filler matches. So, yeah, nothing too big.
Did the Rougeos fight the Bulldogs?
Yeah. But that was one of the Bulldogs last. I think their last match was Survivor Series. But yeah, a lot of those old timers got phased out on this pay-per-view. But yeah, beyond that, nothing much noteworthy about this SummerSlam other than it being the first one. Number 24. This one is way underrated in my opinion. 1991. I thought this was an awesome show. I love this SummerSlam for the entertainment value. This was a great show. The main event, Hogan and Warrior versus Team Slaughter. Entertaining match. You have all the personalities. This was Warrior's last match. He got fired as soon as he went back to the curtain and didn't appear again until WrestleMania 8. You had it was the match made in hell and the match made in heaven. The wedding of Randy Savage and Elizabeth. You had one of the best SummerSlam matches of all time. Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect for the IC title. You had LOD versus the Nasty Boys. LOD winning the tag team titles. You had the Jailhouse match. Big Boss Man versus the Mountie, and the Mountie being put in jail, and that guy coming in the cell, his cellmate. That was a very entertaining segment. And you had Virgil winning the $1 million title from Ted DiBiase. This was a fun show. This was a very eventful pay-per-view from the WWF. And I believe it was the first time that Ric Flair's name was mentioned on WWF television as well. I loved this show, and to me it's criminally underrated. What do you think?
Wasn't the first time Flair was mentioned, because he was mentioned on the syndicated shows, because Bobby brought the big gold belt out and showed it off on Challenge with Neidhart and Monsoon. I remember that. It was the first pay-per-view he was mentioned that, because Heenan took the belt to Hogan's dressing room door and got slammed in the face as a result by Hogan.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But yeah, this was my first ever pay-per-view, ever WWF home video I ever got bought for me. This one holds a special place in my heart, and I'm so glad that the network now carries all the pay-per-views, because for me, the Coliseum home video of this that I had for so many years eventually got worn out because the tape got so onion skin thin from watching it so much that I couldn't watch it anymore, which sucks because on the network, they don't have the broadcast of the wedding reception like you do on the tape.
Yeah. The wedding reception is definitely great. I mean, that's how the pay-per-view should have ended live, with Jake and the Undertaker crashing the party.
Yes.
That was a great storyline. So yeah, I really enjoyed this show a lot. Next up at number 25, we have 1994 Undertaker versus Undertaker. This was one of the worst SummerSlam main events ever. Undertaker's entrance was awesome. Of course, his big comeback. Spectacular entrance. But once the bell rang, this died a brutal death. The crowd just went completely silent, and the match was awful. Terrible match. Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. Classic match, cage match. When I watched it the first time, I wasn't a huge fan because they were both trying to escape the cage. I felt too much, but Bret explained that because they had no blood during that time, they had to be creative and come up with something to make the match exciting. And it was exciting. And, I respect the match and the athleticism in it. And I like the storyline with, Bulldog and all the Hart family members being locked out of the cage, and Neidhart and Owen beating down Bret in the ring, and stopping all the Hart family members from trying to get in. I thought that was really strong, and I like the finish too with Owen's legs being caught in the cage and Bret winning that way. This was a great match, great storyline. I like the heel turn of Tatanka joining the $1 Million Man. They were teasing that Lex Luger had sold out to the $1 Million Man. And Jeff is having an issue here. But yeah, I thought that was a really good storyline with the $1 Million Man, Lex Luger, and Tatanka. And you had Razor Ramon versus Diesel for the IC title, with Razor winning the title. This was a pretty good show, I thought. Not a terrible SummerSlam. I think maybe it's a little bit lower than it should be. What did you think of the show?
Like you said, it wasn't a horrible pay-per-view, but it wasn't the best SummerSlam ever.
Oh, yeah.
There was some highlights. You had Owen and Bret, which was a highlight. You had Razor and Diesel, which was a highlight. I thought for Diesel's first SummerSlam outing, it was very, very well done. In Razor, of course, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash worked so well together. They always did. Those two guys were awesome.
And the football player was there.
Undertaker, which was...
Who's the football player that came out with?
Walter Payton was with him.
Yeah.
Walter Payton.
Yeah, he was there too.
Who was a football player in Chicago? Come on, man! Come on!
No, I'm not the sports guy, Jeff.
I know that. I'm just giving you a hard time. The Undertaker match and finish was very hokey. The whole storyline going into it with Leslie Nielsen and his partner from the Police Academy movies, it was just like, oh God. But I thought the entrances were very well done. That was really the highlight of that match, was the entrances and the exit.
Yeah, exactly. But then, unfortunately, we had to actually watch them wrestle, and it was all downhill from there.
Yes.
All right. So now we're down to the bottom three, and two of these three I definitely feel are the bottom. 1993, I thought this show was terrible. Awful SummerSlam. Awful show. Lex Luger versus Yokozuna main event. All this build up for Lex Luger, the Lex Express. He gets the big entrance, and he wins by countout. And he celebrates like he won the world title, even though he won by countout. This was so dumb.
It was so bad.
I hated it. I thought it was awful. I thought that Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Perfect was really disappointing. Going into this pay-per-view, I was looking forward to this match so much, and it just wasn't anything special. It was a real letdown. That was like a dream match for me, to see those two have a match at SummerSlam for the IC title, and it just didn't deliver. I mean, Perfect was past his prime at that point, and I don't know. They just didn't work well together on that night. And then you had... in my opinion, the one really good match on this show was Bret Hart versus supposed to be Jerry Lawler, but Lawler faked his injury and had Doink come out as his court jester. I thought this was the whole segment was really entertaining, and then Bret got his match with Lawler and beat up Lawler and put the sharpshooter on him and wouldn't let go. I thought this whole storyline was awesome. To me, just this thing was great. Everything else on this show sucked. What do you think? You agree?
Got it. I totally agree. 93 was easily the worst SummerSlam, in my opinion.
Well, there you go. All right, number 27, 1989, which I thought this was a decent show. I wouldn't say it was awful. I wouldn't say it's the second worst SummerSlam of all time. Hogan and Beefcake against Randy Savage and Zeus. Yeah, the wrestling wasn't great in this main event, but I thought it was an entertaining storyline with Zeus coming off a no holds barred and Randy Savage in there. You know, you had the star power in this main event, and you had Sherry out there, Miss Elizabeth. I thought it was an entertaining main event, and you had Ultimate Warrior winning back the IC title from Rick Rude, and Rick Rude was like SummerSlam '90. Rude really carried the Warrior, and I think some of Warrior's best matches in his entire career were with Rick Rude. And this one was no exception. You had Roddy Piper coming out to help Warrior win the title and make sure Bobby Heenan didn't interfere again. The star power on the show was really strong. And you had the big blooper moment with Mean Gene Okerlund, the sign falling behind him. I don't know if you remember that. This was one of the few pay-per-views that Tony Schiavone actually did play-by-play, which gives it a little bit of a different feel from your typical WWF pay-per-views. I thought the show was all right. I didn't feel it was terrible. And then the final pay-per-view...
No, I wouldn't...
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Give you any thoughts you want to add to that from that pay-per-view?
It wasn't a bad show. It could have been better, but it's definitely not in the bottom two. I mean, compared to like 93 or some of the other ones, it was just like, ooh, they're terrible.
Yeah. I thought it was bad. I think I enjoyed it more than 88, at least. 1988 SummerSlam. But
I think so.
Yeah. All right, and the bottom one, the lowest ranked SummerSlam, and I totally agree with this. It's a toss up. It's a toss up for me between 93 and 95. 95 was just terrible show. If you take out Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in the ladder match, I mean, perhaps the worst major WWE pay-per-view of all time. You had Diesel versus Mabel as the main event. Do I need to say more? And even Bret Hart's match. Bret Hart was having so many great matches, but the match with Isaac Yankem was really nothing special. Like I said, Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, they tore it up. They saved the show from being a complete dud. Any thoughts you want to add to this one? Anything else?
Long-time contributor Greg Cherry and I always talk about SummerSlam 95 because that was his first pay-per-view he ever went to for WWF because he lives in Pittsburgh. And he was there, and I mentioned in my first pay-per-view was WrestleMania 2000, and we go, it's a dead heat for which one was worse.
Oh, yeah. You know what? 1, 2, 3 Kid.
I mean, WrestleMania 2000 was really...
1, 2, 3 Kid and Hakushi actually had, I thought, a decent match.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I liked Hakushi. I think he was one of those guys that was very underutilized. I mean, I felt he should have had a much lengthier run in WWF, but yeah, he was only there about 6 months, I think, not even a full year. I thought he was really good, and he was definitely one of the better athletes that they had during that period. One of the few really good athletes they had, and he was only there for 6 months to a year. So yeah, that was a shame. But yeah, that pay-per-view sucked. Terrible show. All right, so that'll do it.
Did. It was awful.
Yeah, that'll do it for our thoughts. Thank you for being on today, Jeff. Make sure you guys follow Jeff at Twitter _Jeff Meacham. Of course, Jeff has Talk Wrestling and After the Bell on NoDQ.com. Any other plugs you want to get out there?
No, you did everything for me.
Doing your job for you. All right, so make sure you guys check out Jeff's stuff.
I appreciate that. If you want to plug anything, give me some questions for Talk Wrestling this week, people.
All right, send in. Yeah, well, people watching this, send Jeff questions for Talk Wrestling at twitter.com/_Jeff Meacham. My name's Aaron Rift. I've been joined by Jeff Meacham today. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your feedback, what you agree with, what you disagree with about the list, and we'll see you guys next time.